Hey guys and welcome. This is going to be my build video for the Magicka Dragonknight for the Summerset patch. Just to sort of get right into it, we are an Imperial on this build. This is not on the list of recommended races. This is more personal preference for myself. If I was going to recommend any races to you guys for this build, it would be Dark Elf, High Elf, Argonian, and Breton. Dark Elf's going to offer you the best damage possible. High Elf is going to offer you a little bit less damage but more sustain on the Magicka recovery end. Argonians for general tankiness and survivability. They have great healing passives. They can also experiment with potions thanks to their resourceful passive, so they can play around with things like lingering health and movable and speed pots. Breton is going to be good for cost reduction, the Magicka pool, and the spell resistance. Those are all things useful to a Magicka Dragonknight, so those races are definitely ones you could try out with this build. But for me, like I said, it's personal preference for an Imperial, and I'll kind of explain why right now. Tough is going to give me increased max health of 12%. I think having a higher health pool this patch is pretty important with everybody's increase to damage with the changes to the two-hand and bows offering 2-piece set bonuses. A lot of these builds that were running separate 5-piece bonuses on the front, one on back, or running a 5-piece and a 4-piece, they now have access to a 5-5-2 build just like Sword and Board users, so they get the benefit of those bonuses without really having to lose any sort of damage changing weapons. So the higher health pool helps mitigate that somewhat. Conditioning for 10% increased max stamina. I have 0 investment into stamina on this build other than this passive, and I have 18.7k stamina. It's a little bit more stamina than you'll get on Dark Elf in the same build. I think my Dark Elf DKs have something like 18.1 with this build, and they have to run 1 Triglyph to get over 18k, so it's nice just to be able to hit those kind of numbers with the only investment being the passive and one of our 5-piece bonuses. Red Diamond, melee attacks have a 10% chance to restore 7% on our max health. This in conjunction with Degeneration, which is the Mage's Guild ability that gives us our major sorcery. It also gives us a % chance to restore health on heavy and light attacks up to a certain amount of % of the damage done. So combining those two things is just another source of incoming healing that I find useful. To head back to the stat sheet, we've got 37k max magicka, 28k health, 18.7 max stamina, 1344 magicka recovery, 248 health recovery, 733 stamina recovery. We have 1964 spell damage, 32% spell critical, 22.4k spell resistance, 18.8k physical resistance, and we round that out with about 2500 critical resistance. We're using Tri-Staff Food and a Tri-Potion Jar of Primary Potions. I'm running the Atronach for the increased regen, and I am a Vampire on this build. I know going to this patch, a lot of people said that playing Vampire was going to be very difficult with the changes they made to light attack damage, specifically playing against Flame Staffs, and I will admit it is a problem, but only if the opponent is running the Psijic skills, the Imbue weapon skill, and the Elemental weapon morph. But the amount of people open world Cyrodiil that actually run that ability is very low. The only time I've ever run into that ability is in like an open world duel with other experienced players or something like that, but generally for the most part I don't run into the Imbue weapon skill, so I don't have the problem of Flame Staff light attacks doing a lot of damage. Very rarely do I look at a death recap and go, well, the reason I lost that fight was because Flame Staff light attack did way too much damage to me. It just doesn't work that way open Cyrodiil. There's many more things to worry about than that. So a Vampire is definitely okay to run on this build. Things like Undeath, the Magicka and Stamina, regen increase, and the Ultimate are all very valuable things to this build that I can't really see myself running without. So to jump into the sets really quick, we are running... This is a heavy armor build, just for starters. It's 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium. We make our 5 heavy armor pieces through our head, chest, gauntlets, legs, and boots. We have a sash we have a satch, which is our light armor piece. There we go. And a medium piece is going to be our shoulder. It's 5 impen, 3 sturdy. Your 3 sturdy pieces are going to be your shoulder, your arms, and your shield. Everything else will be impen, and we're running all arcane on the jewelry. A Nirnhoned sword, the sturdy shield like I said, and then the infused ice staff on the back bar. Our first set bonus is going to be our 2-piece. It's going to be Valkynscoria, very straightforward in a Magicka DK. Valkynscoria is great for creating bursts on a class that has very little on its own. It's going to give us a nice bonus of max health as well too. Our second 5-piece, or first 5-piece rather, is going to be Shackle Breaker. I used to play more Seducer on this build. I used to crutch on Seducer's cost reduction and the regen bonuses it gave as a way to sustain in heavy armor in a Magicka DK. Coming into this patch with everybody's sort of increased damage from now being able to run 2 5-set bonuses, I felt like my damage was a little bit lacking and I wasn't able to apply the same sort of pressure that people were applying to me. So after a couple conversations with people, I pretty much decided that my damage wasn't good enough. My sustain was very good and almost too good. It was almost too much sustain for myself, and that I needed to kind of come back on the sustain and put more damage into the build, and Shackle Breaker is what I came up with. It's going to give you weapon damage, spell damage, magic recovery, stamina recovery, and then the 2000 max magicka and max stamina. It puts my stamina pool at an all-time high for any build that I've run. Having 18k stamina open world is so nice. It makes my stamina sustain so much easier. The 2000 extra magicka puts my magicka pool at 37k in conjunction with the spell damage bonus. It does so much more damage in this build than I would have ever done with Seducer on the bar. And I honestly really don't miss Seducer all that much. The cost reduction, even losing that 8% cost reduction, I find that I don't really feel it, and my sustain feels very, very good on this build. The second 5-piece we're going to be running is Silks of the Sun. Like I said, it's going to be your jewelry, your sword and shield, and the eye staff on the back bar. We are running all arcane, like I mentioned before. This is really the only jewelry trait that I would run on these. If I was to run anything else, you could run infused on this piece right here, the gold necklace with the spell damage. If you run infused on a gold piece with spell damage, I think you actually end up doing a little bit more damage than you would with just a regular gold glyph in the arcane trait, so keep that in mind. Another good place to put it too, if you want, is on the cost reduction glyph here, and we are running 1 damage, 1 regen, 1 cost reduction. I'm running the disease damage glyph on the sword as a way to sort of experiment and try to get find a way to pull in Major Defile into this build without having to go to something like an ultimate or a set like Durok's Bane. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. If you don't want to run this, you could definitely run the Oblivion damage enchant instead. Running infused on our ice staff. This is going to make it so that our weapon and spell damage glyph can be up 100% of the time. Normally the glyph has a 10-second cooldown, so the 5 seconds that it's up, and then you have to wait 5 seconds afterward before you can reapply it. With infused, it increases the effectiveness of the glyph, so giving us more spell damage, and decreasing the cost of decreasing the time of the cooldown by 50%. So pretty much once the 5 seconds is over, you can switch to your back bar and reapply it. It's just a really good way to have a constant upkeep of spell damage that's going to help our damage and healing in fights. For skills, we are running Burning Ember, Fossilize, Choking Talons, Flame Lash, Cauterize, and Ferocious Leap for our Sword and Board bar. And on the Destro bar, we're running the Coagulating Blood, Reflective Plate, Elemental Drain, Degeneration, Volatile Armor, and Bats is going to be our ultimate here. Burning Embers, Incredible Dot, Incredible Burst Heal. This is probably your most important buff, debuff, whatever you want to call it, to keep up on targets in a fight. The more people you have this on, the more sources of incoming healing you're going to have. It also applies a nice little snare to people when you put it on, so just make sure that you're managing this this buff pretty well in fights. It's super important to have up. Fossilize is our main single target CC, our hard CC. I've switched back to Fossilize over Stone Giants after the changes for Fossilize happened. It no longer applies that dinky little damage shield that it used to when you put it on a target, so your damage doesn't kind of get gimped while it's on. You're doing the most of your damage at all times when you use this. I also really like the double CC on this build so much that I would be against running Shattering Rocks. While Shattering Rocks is nice to be able to go into your Power Lash right away, I feel like the positional advantages that Fossilize give you and it being a double CC are way too valuable to lose. Choking Talons is going to be our AoE soft CC. We use it mainly for the minor main debuff, reducing opponents' damage done by 15% for 7 seconds. It does decent damage, but that's not really what we're putting in there for. If you run Burning Talons and you haven't tried this out yet, I encourage you to. You really will not miss the dot from Burning Talons at all, and the minor maim debuff is such a good debuff to have, especially open world. It's going to make you a lot tankier. One thing you can do, and this was suggested to me, and I had a really difficult time trying it out in the beginning just because talents have been on my bar since, like, pretty much since beta. But once I played around with it more and got used to it, you can run Draw Essence instead of Talons on this bar. I run Draw Essence for the Magicka Sustain over the AoE interrupt that Deep Breath is, because I find that the amount of people using interruptible abilities in your face these days are next to none. Templars don't really walk up to you and use Radiant Destruction, though that might change next patch with the buff that that's getting. Things like Wrecking Blow have not been interruptible for a very long time, and the things that you really do need to interrupt these days, things like Dark Deals from sorcerers that they use in your face, what's the one I'm looking for? The Engine Guardian proc, things like that. You can just simply bash that, and you have enough stamina in this build where you can afford to throw out a bash every now and again to stop these things. So I definitely prefer the sustain from Draw Essence versus the AoE interrupt for Deep Breath. The only thing that you won't be able to do without Deep Breath is stop reses in group fights, so that's something to consider depending on what your play style is, which morph you'd like to use more. But it's definitely something worth trying out. It actually increases your burst damage very well. The burst combo becomes Draw Essence, Light Attack, Fossilize, Light Attack, and then if you have your ultimate, you're going to leap. If you have your Flame Lash, you're going to whip. If you do have the ultimate, you're going to Flame Lash after it, and if your Valken procs anywhere on top of that, it's just so much incoming damage. It helps burst down targets incredibly, incredibly well. Flame Lash is the bread and butter single target DPS, 8.7k for the initial Flame Lash, and then 10.2 for the Power Lash. This is all unbuffed. Not bad numbers. Obviously, they would be better on a Dark Elf, but fully buffed on this build, including Silks of the Sun, you're going to have 3,299 spell damage. That's going to put your base Flame Lash at 10.2k, your Power Lash at 12k, and it's going to make that heal so much higher. So damage is definitely not something that this build will miss at all, and it's definitely not something you'll miss if you decide to run something other than Dark Elf. You can definitely make it work without Dark Elf. Cauterize is a very, very good single target heal. It's a very strong single target heal over time. It's incredibly valuable. When I made the switch from Inner Light to this ability, I honestly don't know how I played at all during this patch without Cauterize. It's such a good ability. This is probably your second most important buff to keep up in fights. You want to refresh this every 15 seconds. Using it in combinations with Burning Embers to get a burst heal, with your Power Lash, there's so much incoming healing on this bar that it's actually kind of insane for Magicka DK. One little trick you can use with Cauterize here is if you're in trouble kiting or you're just taking a lot of incoming damage and you need like a quick burst of healing, you can Cauterize, swap, and then Coagulating Blood. If one of those or even both of those abilities crit, it's an insane amount of healing all at once, so keep that in mind if you need like a quick burst of healing. Ferocious Leap is our ultimate, pretty straightforward, 125, low cost, does a shit ton of damage, and you get a nice damage shield for 51% of your max health after using it. So for the back bar here, we're running Coagulating Blood. This is going to be your kind of like your oh shit heal. It's a very good heal on its own, but with the amount of healing that we have incoming on our front bar between Burning Embers, Draw Essence, Cauterize, the Flame Lash, Power Lash heal, there's enough healing where you shouldn't have to use this too often, though if you do end up needing to kind of fall back and rely on it, it is a very good heal. Running Reflective Plate. If you've been playing Magicka Dragonknight for as long as I have, you remember the days where this ability was on your bar all the time in the form of Fire Dragon Scale, and how nice it was just to be able to reflect everything. And it is so nice to finally have this ability back on the bar and have it fulfill fit a role, fill a need. It's just nice to have it. It's nice to be able to use it again. The main reason we use it though is for the on activation, you're going to remove all snare effects. That includes roots and immobilizes. So it works the same as Mist Form in being able to get us out of sort of sticky situations. You do give up Major Expedition from Mist Form, but you get back the ability to reflect projectiles and everything like that. And honestly, weighing the pros and the cons from the two abilities, I leaned more toward Reflective Plate for a couple more reasons than the ones I just said. One being that when you use Reflective Plate, your Magicka regen doesn't go to 0. It's also a much lower cost than Mist Form is. And then while you're in Mist Form, if you remember how it works, you are immune to healing effects. So if you have your Cauterize up in a fight and you need to reposition or get it, just purge a bunch of snares on you, and you Mist Form, and that Cauterize procs, you're not getting that heal. With Reflective Plate, you can just hit the button. You get the same effect from the snare removal as Mist Form, and you're able to freely move, and you're also able to reflect projectiles, all at a lower cost, all while your regen is still ticking, and all while your healing over time effects are still hitting you. So with all of those things in mind, I definitely decided to lean more toward using this ability than Mist Form, and next patch this ability is going to get even better when we get 2 seconds of immunity to snares, roots, and immobilizes. Elemental Drain is the entire reason that we're running a Destro Staff bar. This ability packs so much damage into it, as well as so much sustain. You can see right here that you afflict your opponent with Major Breach for 24 seconds, reducing their spell resistance by almost 5.3k. That's a big amount of spell resistance to lose on a target. So I had done a lot of testing months ago with Engulfing Flame versus this ability, and this ability does just as much of a damage increase for all of your other abilities as Engulfing Flame does. The only thing is you swap out a dot for Minor Magicka Steal. So Minor Magicka Steal works that anytime you deal damage, you get 300 Magicka back every 1 second. When you have this includes dots, so having dots up on an opponent, this is going to tick every second for 300 Magicka back to you. It's an effective 600 Magicka recovery. It's very, very good. It's a very important buff you want to keep up on people. One way to get it going in outnumbered fights is you would just put this on somebody, hit your volatile armor so you get your armor buff, and the AoE dot going from this, so this is always going. Degeneration I talked a little bit about before. It's our major sorcery buff. It's going to give us the light and heavy attack chance to heal on the damage done from it. I like this in conjunction with the red diamond passive. I also don't like having the de-syncing health from structured entropy. And then volatile armor, straightforward, it's our armor buff. AoE dot, it's a pretty good dot, and it's going to help keep up our elemental drain. Bats is our ultimate here. You could run standard for the major defile. I have done it. I have not had very much success with it. I find more times when you drop a standard, people are more quickly get out of the AoE of it and just sort of stand out on the side and pump damage in, and you have to chase them down, reapply it, drop it again, and then they move and the process continues. Whereas Devouring Swarm, people don't really care if you pop it. Like if they're in your face and you pop Devouring Swarm, they're just like, okay, whatever, I'm going to keep fighting. And having them keep fighting inside of you is advantageous to you. It's more healing for you. It's another form of damage to you. It's also very low cost compared to shifting standard. So I still like Bats Open World for this build. Alright, now to get into our champion points. So we're going to have 72 points into Warlord for our break free cost reduction. Very important to have. It's going to be part of your stamina sustain. You're pretty much going to be getting CC'd as soon as CC immunity fails by good players, so being able to reduce that cost is very important. I put points in the Sprinter for this build because I talked before about how when you run Wings, you lose the Major Expedition from Mist Form. So what I like to do with Wings on the bar is when I need to reposition or create space, I'll pop Wings and I'll immediately start sprinting. This reduced sprint cost helps me do that more and helps me keep my stamina pool at a manageable level. It's very noticeable when I do not have points into this, so I definitely recommend putting points into Sprinter if you're going to use Scales over Mist Form. 75 points into Magic Recovery, super straightforward. 81 points into block cost reduction, again, very straightforward for Magicka Dragonknight. This in combination with your 3 sturdy pieces, with your block cost reduction from Sword and Board, and your block cost reduction from Ice Staff, you're going to be able to block for a really long time. So for our blue trees here, we're going to have 65 points into Elemental Expert, 55 into Spell Erosion. This is super important to have on this build because this stacks with your Elemental Drain penetration, so you're getting 9.4k spell penetration on a target, which is in heavy armor. That's huge. You get all the benefits of light armor. You have the extra crit from using Cauterize, and now you're getting the spell penetration from Ele Drain and Spell Erosion, all while having the resistances and sustain that heavy armor offers. It's super important to have points into that on this build. 37 points into Elfborn, increasing our critical and critical healing by 15%. Straightforward. You just want more damage. You just want to hit harder when you crit. This is how you do it. 21 points into Blessed here. A little bit extra healing I put into the build. It feels good for me, and I like having that there. You are free to move those points around if you so choose. 72 points into Master at Arms. This is where a majority of your damage is going to come from. Super important after they had made the initial changes to the percentages of some CP, specifically Elemental Expert. This was one way to get a lot of that damage that you lost back. I do not like running points into Thaumaturge, and I'll go into that really quickly. Master at Arms, Spell Erosion, Elemental Expert, all are going to increase your damage. These are Master at Arms and Elemental Expert are all going to directly increase your damage. Thaumaturge increases dot damage, and if you think about the dots that you run in a Magicka DK on this build, Burning Embers is a flame dot, it's covered by Elemental Expert. Volatile Ember dot is a Magicka dot, covered by Elemental Expert. Degeneration dot is a Magicka dot, covered by Elemental Expert. Spell Erosion is going to further increase those damages by having more penetration. It's going to get closer to the tooltip values instead of having resistances mitigate them. Elfborn is going to have all those things when they crit harder. So what I'm trying to say here is that I believe if you were to put points into Thaumaturge, you would have to take points out of Master at Arms, Spell Erosion, Elemental Expert, or Elfborn, or a combination of all four, to increase some form of, to increase a dot damage that's pretty much already being increased in this. You're only hurting your single target damage, you're only hurting your more upfront damage, you're hurting your Flame Lash, you're hurting your Leap, you're hurting your Talons, you're hurting Draw Essence, things like that, just to get a little bit more dot damage on Volatile Armor, which doesn't tick that hard, Degeneration, which doesn't tick that hard, and Burning Embers, which while it does tick hard, it's the only hard-hitting dot on the build. I don't think it's worth it to put points in the Thaumaturge. If you want to take these points out of Blessed and put them anywhere, you can put them in here to try that out, but like I said, I don't like this passive. I believe it's a passive that becomes more useful to players when we get more CP and we're finished putting points into the other damaging passives, that I just can't really see myself using this for actually a very long time. Our red tree is going to be 72 into Ironclad, 48 into crit resistance. We're going to have 56 into thick skin, 37 hardy and elemental defender, and we don't run anything in this tree. You can play around with this, bump this up if you want. I like having the 25k crit resistance on this build. One thing that crit resistance does help, that resistances do not help against, that is very prevalent in this current meta, is physical axe bleeds. A lot of stamina builds are running dual wield axes to apply bleeds, and your resistances do not do anything against those. The only way you can really mitigate those are crit resistance right here and thick skin. So it's important to have points into those. You want to be able to reduce that damage. It's still difficult to deal with, but with all of the incoming healing that we have on this build between Embers, Cauterize, Draw Essence, Coagulating Blood, or Battle Roar, it makes it a lot easier to deal with dot pressure builds. Like I said, we don't run into anything into here, but if you were to put points in here, you felt like you wanted to put points into this tree, you could put them into either Quick Recovery to increase your healing a little bit more, or Expert Defender. Expert Defender is going to help reduce light and heavy attack damage, and in this patch, reduced light attack damage is useful with the changes that they made, where light attacks are pretty much the damaging attack, heavy attacks are more sustained attacks, so being able to reduce those are very important here. That's it for our CP. There is one thing I wanted to go over as far as skills goes, depending on how you're playing. This setup right here, these bars, are what I run when I play by myself, solo, or in like a duo group. As soon as I get into a group that I have a dedicated healer, you have a couple options that you can do. One of them being you can take Cauterize off and put it in place. You can put Inner Light in its place. Inner Light, when you do that, it's going to bump your Magicka up to 39k on this build, and all your tooltip damages are going to go up. You can see here that our whip went from 8.7 to 9k, which is very good. Same thing, if you want to keep Cauterize on in those group settings with a dedicated healer, you can. The only thing with Cauterize is that the more people that are around you, the more people that the healer are going to go to that aren't you. The cross healing can be valuable, which is why I keep it on in more duos than I would if I had a dedicated healer. But if you feel like your group's healing and cross healing is sufficient enough where you don't need to run this, you can definitely run Inner Light to do a little bit more damage. Meteor is a viable ultimate to run in place of Ferocious Leap. It combos extremely well with Fossilized. It combos extremely well with Draw Essence, Falcon Scoria. It's just a very good ultimate. You're going to get more resources back when you use it. Like I said, I prefer Ferocious Leap for the cost of it, as well as the damage shield you get, but Meteor is definitely not a bad ultimate to run into this place, and to run in Ferocious Leap's place. So that's the build, guys. I hope my explanations here gave you some kind of insight into why I run some of the things I do, the sets I do, the abilities, a couple tips and tricks to help you with the playstyle and everything like that. This build is honestly probably the most fun build I've ever had to play with on a Magicka Dragonknight. I've found a lot of success with this build. I really enjoy playing this class with this build, and I hope that you guys give it a shot, and I hope that you enjoy it too. If you have any more questions, comments, concerns, and maybe some things I missed or some more things you want to know, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I will try to get back to it as best I can with my work schedule. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in.